Hi, welcome to Psychology. Here we are with Chapter 14, Theories of Personality. All right, Section 1. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the trait approach. Psychologists study personality to discover patterns of feelings, motives, and behavior that set people apart from one another. Trait theorists attempt to understand personality by focusing on traits or those aspects of personality that remain stable. Psychologist Hans Eysenck used two basic dimensions of personality, introversion and extroversion, and emotional stability and instability, to organize these traits. So the five-trait approach, the five-factor model, identifies five basic personality factors: extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and openness to experience. Psychologists who support the trait approach believe that the personality traits are inborn and unchanging. Many trait theorists believe that people can be measured according to the five basic personality factors. Who have been the most influential trait theorists should be one of the questions that you are able to answer. What is the five-factor model, and how do some psychologists evaluate the approach? Trait theorists. Personality is the patterns and feelings, motives, and behavior that set people apart from one another. Traits are an aspect of your personality that is considered to be reasonably stable. Hippocrates was the Greek physician who believed that the body contains fluids called humors in a combination which produce personality traits. Yellow bile, quick-tempered; blood bile was warm and cheerful; phlegm was sluggish and cool; black bile was melancholic and thoughtful. And so these biles would be to various strengths, and that would indicate what kind of person that you are. Gordon Allport cataloged 18,000 human traits in the 1930s. He described physical traits, behavioral traits, and moral traits. Gordon Allport asserted that a person's behavior is the product of his or her particular combination of traits. Hans Eysenck studied two personality dimensions: introverts, which tend to be imaginative, look inward for their ideas and energy, while extroverts tend to be active and self-expressive and gain energy from interaction with other people. Stable people are reliable, while unstable people are unpredictable. Eysenck's personality types are similar to those of Hippocrates. The idea that there may be five basic personality factors: extroversion, emotional stability, conscientiousness, agreeableness, openness to experience. Research on the five factors studies have found correlations between certain behaviors and particular traits. People who receive many traffic tickets, for example, score lower on the agreeableness score. The five-factor model helps psychologists to describe anxiety disorders. Psychologists still disagree about which factors are the most basic, but nearly all would agree that the big five are important. Okay, the five-factor model can be remembered. It is considered the most valid of the personality models that we use. It can be easily remembered by using the acronym OCEAN. O stands for openness to experience. C stands for conscientiousness. E stands for extroversion. A stands for agreeableness. And N stands for neuroticism, or emotional stability and instability. So so openness to experience contrasts imagination, curiosity, creativity with shallowness and a lack of perceptiveness. Conscientiousness contrasts organization with thoroughness and reliability with carelessness, negligence, and unreliability. Extroversion contrasts talkativeness and assertiveness and activity with silence, passivity, and reserve. Agreeableness contrasts kindness, trust, warmth, and with hostility, selfishness, and distrust. And neuroticism is emotional stability and instability, and it contrasts reliability and coping ability with nervousness and sensitivity to negative events. One shortcoming of the trait approach is its singular focus on describing traits. Efforts to link personality traits to biological factors have not been successful. This approach suggests that there are links between personalities, abilities, and interests. It provides no explanation of how personality develops. Section 2. The psychoanalytic approach. According to the psychoanalytic approach, personality is shaped by inner struggles that all people experience. The psychoanalytic approach is based on Sigmund Freud's theories about the structure of the mind, defense mechanisms, and the stages of personality development. Many of Freud's intellectual errors have made unique contributions to the psychoanalytic approach. So in this section, what we're going to talk about is the psychoanalytic approach to personality, and it stresses the influence of the unconsciousness on personality, and it's proposed by the great psychologists Freud, Jung, Adler, Horney, and Erikson. These are among the most important of the psychoanalytic theorists. What theories did Sigmund Freud develop about the mind would be one of your first questions. Why do people use defense mechanisms? What are Freud's main stages of personality development? Who are important psychoanalytic theorists? And how do psychologists evaluate psychoanalytic approach? Sigmund Freud, is the psychoanalytic approach to the personality, teaches that all people undergo inner struggles. People are born with certain biological drives such as aggression, sex, and the need for superiority. These drives come into conflict with laws, norms, and moral codes. The unconscious. Freud believed the conscious ideas and the feeling occupy only a small part of the mind. The deepest thoughts, fears, and urges remain out of their awareness. Psychoanalysis urges people to discuss whatever is on their minds. Sometimes it's called the talking cure. Freud also used dream analysis and hypnosis to access the unconsciousness. The id. Freud's idea of the id. It behaves like the stereotypical 2-year-old who represents your basic drives, such as hunger. It demands instant gratification and pays no attention to the rules or the others, and follows the pleasure principle. So the id is the little devil sitting on your shoulder. The ego develops because demands for instant gratification can't be met immediately or safely, and it's guided by the reality principle, the understanding that we cannot always get what we want. Most of the ego is conscious, but it works on the unconscious to censor the impulses of the id in the balance of the superego. So the ego is the little angel sitting on your other shoulder. The superego develops throughout early childhood and follows a moral principle and incorporates the standards and values of parents and society and provides us with our moral sense and acts as our conscious. The defense mechanisms are methods that the ego uses to avoid recognizing ideas or emotions that may cause anxiety. These defenses operate unconsciously. It removes anxiety, causing ideas from conscious awareness by pushing them to the unconscious. Freud likened repression to keeping the lid on boiling a kettle. When enough pressure builds up, the outbursts of anger or other problems develop. Rationalization, so when we repress an idea, this is when we have something that we've done that's bad in the past and we don't want to think about it, we don't know anyone to bring it up, and we just keep it bottled up, pretend like it never happened. Rationalization is the use of self-deception to justify unacceptable behaviors or ideas. It can protect one's self-esteem or self-concept, but it can also mask the real problem and prevent the person from dealing with the situation. So rationalization might be, oh, I failed that test because he didn't teach that portion in class or something like that, instead of accepting responsibility that as the student that you just didn't study sufficiently. That would be rationalization. Regression. Regression is returning to behavior that's characteristics of an earlier stage development when faced with stress. Regression is usually temporary, but becomes a problem when it's used to avoid adult behavior. The best thing I can think of here is with regression is if you've ever had a really bad breakup with a significant other, or something really terrible has happened and you kind of curled up into a ball on your bed and cried. That's you're regressing back to an earlier stage, to where you were a little kid. And that was acceptable. Not to say that there's anything wrong with it, but that is what you're going through. You're going through this period of regression, and it's a defense mechanism that's used to cope with the situation. Projection is dealing with unacceptable impulses by projecting these impulses outward onto other people. People see their own faults in other people. So projection would be that case where when somebody accuses you of doing something wrong and you say, yeah, but you did that. So you took the last pizza and he says, yeah, but you took the last piece of cake or something like that. So you're projecting out there, making it look like, trying to make the other person look worse. Okay. Effects of defense mechanisms. When used in moderation, defense mechanisms are normal and useful. We all do them, and we see them in our lives on a daily basis. They become unhealthy when they lead a person to ignore the underlying issues causing the feelings. All right, so it becomes a real problem when our defense mechanisms prevent us from really coping with our problems. It's sort of like I had a friend who tended to get fired from their job a lot, and she would always project onto the employers that they were unfair, or they had favorites, or they were prejudiced against them or something like that, instead of accepting the fact that they took too many breaks, they came to work late, and they often weren't honest about when mistakes were made. So that's what happened. All right, so there are other defense mechanisms that we see. Freud's daughter, Anna Freud, worked to explain defense mechanisms in more depth, and she included the ones listed below. Displacement is defined as the transfer of an idea or impulse from a threatening or unsuitable object to a less threatening object. For example, a football player who is yelled at by his coach may go home and yell at his little brother. And we see this all the time in politics, where people will, they lose their jobs and they blame China or something like that. So that kind of thing is how we frequently displace it, or we blame an ethnic group. Reaction formation, people use the defense of reaction formation to act contrary to the genuine feelings in order to keep their true feelings hidden. For example, someone who is unconsciously attracted to another person may keep the impulses out of their mind by being mean to that person. So this is like that little kids in school kind of idea where, he wouldn't pick on you if he didn't really like you, that kind of thing. Denial. It's not just a river in Egypt. Okay. Denial is the mechanism of denial is a person refuses to accept reality of anything that is bad or upsetting. For example, people who smoke cigarettes may ignore the risks of lung cancer and heart disease from smoking because they think it can't happen to me. Okay, so there's always that denial. It's like all the people running around without masks during the COVID epidemic. It's like they're in denial that they might actually get it. Sublimation. Individuals can channel their basic impulses into socially acceptable behavior through sublimation. For example, a hostile student may channel aggressive impulses into contact sports. And so this is what a lot of times they suggest, that sublimation is a good way of dealing with your anger and things like that. However, research by Albert Bandura in that has shown that sublimation isn't always a very good strategy because it tends to promote anger rather than negate it. Stages of personality development. Freud believed the individual's development went through 5 stages. These stages begin at birth and continue through adolescence. He claimed people instinctively seek to preserve and extend life. Psychological energy, labeled the libido is desire, is one of the most controversial personality theories. Now, the first of his personality stages is the oral stage. It begins that first year of life, and it begins with the idea that infants begin exploring the world by putting things in their mouth, and they receive their main source of pleasure, food, orally, all through their mouth, and they taste the world, and that's an early stage of their development. A child whose caretakers do not meet that infant's needs during this time become fixated at the oral stage, resulting in smoking, overeating, or nail biting. So if you're a smoker or an overeater or a nail biter, it could be that you, according to Freud, weren't satisfied during the oral stage of your development. The anal stage. Now, you guys, this is not as bad as you think. The anal stage is about control. Older infants learn that they can control their bodily functions. So, when you're about, 2 years old, 3 years old, you learn you get potty trained. So this is where the anal stage comes in. So you start learning about your bodily functions, and your self-control becomes vital. You want to avoid embarrassment, so you have to learn to control your body. Fixation at this stage can result in anal retentive behavior such as excessive control, anal expulsive traits such as messiness. So if you're a person who is extremely messy, or a person who everything has to be a particular way, you might have problems with your development at the anal stage. Those who are extremely neat are referred to as anal retentive, because they're trying to keep control over everything. Anal expulsives, on the other hand, are people who just kind of want to let things happen. Okay. The phallic stage begins at about age 3, and this is when children discover the physical difference of the two sexes and they become focused on their bodies. Fixation at this stage can result in disorders such as depression and anxiety. Latency. By age 5 or 6, children have been in conflict with their parents for many years, and so retreat from that conflict. Impulses remain hidden and latent, so they start to suppress their urges. The genital stage, people enter this final stage at puberty. Teens do not encounter any of the psychological conflicts, but earlier conflicts resurface. And so that's where those are Freud's stages. Now, Carl Jung, who is a contemporary of Freud's, Jung was a colleague of Freud but fell into disfavor when he developed his own psychoanalytic theory known as analytic psychology. Analytic psychology places a greater emphasis on the influences of shared symbols and religion on human behavior. He argued that people inherit a collective consciousness, a store of human concepts shared by all people across all cultures. So Jung would suggest that we all have something in common. The components of collective unconsciousness are primitive concepts called archetypes, the ideas and images of accumulated experience of all human beings. Although these images remain in the unconscious, they appear in our dreams. Jung believed that the consciousness was characterized by 4 functions: thinking, feeling, intuition, and sensation. Individuation is creating a healthy personality by integrating consciousness and unconscious elements. Jung's 4 main archetypes are the source of the Myers-Briggs. Okay, and it's the self, the center of the human psyche and personality, unifies the consciousness and unconsciousness. Total unity in God, often symbolized by a circular image called a mandala, like that image at the right. The shadow is the darker side of human nature that embodies chaos and uncontrollable or unacceptable emotions, often represented by devil figures or mysterious enemies. Animus or anima, for feminine qualities within a man's personality, and animus is masculine qualities within a woman's personality. Persona is the public self, the image of the character that a person wants to show the outside world. Alfred Adler believed people are motivated by the need to overcome feelings of inferiority, called the inferiority complex. Introduced the idea of the sibling rivalry to describe jealousness among brothers and sisters. Karen Horney believed that childhood experiences play a major role in development of adult personalities. When parents treat children with indifference or harshness, children develop feelings called basic anxiety. Karen Horney also was the person who refuted Freud's idea of penis envy, where that that's what girls are envious that they don't have a penis. That was something that Freud thought. Erik Erikson believed that social relationships are most important factors in personality development. It expanded Freud's idea of the ego and labeled later stages of development. All right, so Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. We've talked about Erikson before. The first stage is trust versus mistrust, and this is that period that we go through at infancy to age 1. And this is where you come to trust your mother and the environment and to associate surroundings with feelings of inner goodness. Stage 2 is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Here it's your ages 2 and 3 where you develop the desire to make choices and self-control to exercise choice. Stage 3 is initiative versus guilt, and this is your preschool years where you're 4 and 5, where adding and planning and attacking the choice becomes active and on the move. Industry versus inferiority is grammar school, becoming eagerly absorbed in skills, task, and productivity, mastering the fundamentals of technology. Identity versus role diffusion. Adolescence is 13 to 18. This is where you guys are now, and you're connecting your skills and social roles in formation, personal and career objectives. And so this is what we were talking about, your adolescent stage in chapter 11. This is where we were talking about. Now, intimacy versus isolation. This is young adulthood, where you're 19 to 30. The stage that many of you are about to enter is committing oneself to another person, engaging in sexual love. And of course, as we talked about in the previous chapter, or in chapter 12, young adulthood is becoming, starting later and later, because many of us are extending our adolescence till we're much older, since most of us aren't getting married until after we're 27 years old. Stage 7 is generativity versus stagnation, which is middle adulthood. And this is where we're needing to be needed, guiding and encouraging the younger generation and being creative. Finally, stage 8 is integrity versus despair. This is when you're accepting the end of one's own life cycle, achieving wisdom and dignity. And so at this stage is where you look at your life and say, yes, I did good. I'm happy. I'm coping with it. When my time comes, I'll go. Or, you dread the end of your life because you see your life as a failure. So that's how that works. So evaluation is a psychoanalytic approach. Freud was an important champion of the idea the human personality and behavior can be studied scientifically. The psychoanalytic theory focused attention on childhood events. It helps recognize the sexual aggressiveness urges are common, that there is a difference between recognizing these urges and acting upon them. Criticisms of the psychoanalytic approach is there's too much emphasis on unconscious motives, neglected the importance of social relationships and methods of gathering evidence. Evidence only from white middle-class individuals who sought help was another issue with the psychoanalytic approach. Most people pick computer passwords quickly, while others think long and hard. Regardless of how you devise your login, chances are it'll be easier to crack than you think. Most people choose passwords that reflect their personal lives and interests. One study says passwords are unintentionally revealing because people tend to choose the first things that come to mind. 4 distinct types: family, fan, fantasist, and cryptics. The family name, nickname, or birthday of a self or a family member. The fan, names of athletes, movies, stars, singers, fictional characters, teams. Fantasists are interest in a fantasy or identity such as goddess, and cryptics are mixing letters, numbers, symbols, and punctuation. So your password can serve as a personality test. Section 3, we're going to talk about the learning approach, our personality based on learning. 2 branches of learning approach is behaviorism, and social learning theory focuses on how experiences shape behavior. Behaviorists assert that people learn socially desirable behaviors through a process called socialization. Social learning theorists argue that people learn by observation. So in this section, what you should be learned is that the learning approach has 2 branches, behaviorism and social learning theory. Behaviorists believe that our actions are learned. Social learning theorists think that we learn by observation. So at the end of this section, you should be able to answer the question, What are some of the beliefs behind behaviorism? How do social learning theorists approach learning? And why are some psychologists dissatisfied with the learning approach? Behaviorism is the learning approach emphasizes the effects of experience on behavior. Your behaviors reflect what you have been rewarded or reinforced for. John Watson and B.F. Skinner are two of the most known behaviorists. Watson claimed external influences shape people's preferences and behavior. And so he did his experiments on little Albert to show how that would work. Skinner, on the other hand, emphasized the effects of reinforcement on behavior and rejected trying to see within the people's minds as unscientific. Watson and Skinner discarded ideas of personal freedom and choice and self-direction in favor of external influences such as parental approval. And so socialization is the process by which people learn the socially desirable behaviors. Social learning theory focuses on the importance of learning by observation and on the role of cognitive processes that produce individual differences. Albert Bandura argued that particularly any behavior that could be learned from direct experience could also be learned by observing and modeling other people. One study showed that children who witnessed a violent action were more likely to repeat that action. This is his famous study known as the Bobo doll experiment. Another study showed that children would not copy an adult's behavior if adults was punished for that behavior. These studies suggest that children learn what society deems acceptable behavior by watching others' behavior. So that's why when you have small children with you, it's important for you not to do things that would be inappropriate, because they will learn that that inappropriate behavior is acceptable, such as, stealing or swearing or cutting in line perhaps, or something like that. Social cognitive theory. Personality is shaped and learning is acquired by interaction of personal factors. Thoughts, beliefs, values, genetic makeup. One behaviors, actions, and experience. Environmental factors, or social, cultural, and political forces. Social cognitive theory presents a way to understand and predict human behavior. Purposeful learning. Individuals seek to learn about their environments and have a certain degree of control over reinforcement. Behavior is not based solely on observation, and internal variables influence how we act. Internal factors, skills, values, goals, expectations, self-efficacy, and expectations. Evaluation of the learning approach. Learning theory has made key contributions to understanding of behavior, but has also left some psychologists dissatisfied. Behaviorism does not describe, explain, or even suggest the richness of the inner human experience. It does not deal with the thoughts, feelings, or inner maps. Social learning theory attempts to deal with these issues, but critics say it is not satisfactory. Section 4. The humanistic and socio-cultural approaches. The humanistic perspective emphasizes the importance of free choice, self-awareness, and self-fulfillment, self-esteem, and ethical conduct and personality development. Psychologists following the socio-cultural approach focus on how gender, ethnicity, culture influence personality. So the main idea of this section is that humanist psychologists believe that people shape their personalities through free choice and action. Sociocultural psychologists focus on the roles of ethnicity, gender, and culture in personality formation. So at the end of this section, you should be able to answer, what is the focus of humanistic psychology? Who is Carl Rogers? And how do psychologists evaluate the humanistic approach? What is sociocultural psychology? How does the sociocultural approach view personality development? Humanistic psychology. Behaviorists argue that psychologists should not attempt to study self-awareness. Humanists, however, begin with the assumption that self-awareness is the core of humanity. Abraham Maslow believed that humans are separated from lower animals by the drive to reach their potential. Remember, he's the guy with the hierarchy of needs. Each person is unique and must follow his or her own path. Following a personal path involves taking risks. In the hierarchy of needs, as we talked about before, there are 5 levels of the needs: the physiological needs, your security needs, your social needs, your esteem needs, and your self-actualization needs. Carl Rogers is an advocate of the humanistic approach. He believed people are basically good and mentally healthy. He said that people, to some degree, are the architects of their own personalities, and he termed the self-theory. Self-concept is a view of oneself as an individual. The self is concerned with recognizing personal values and establishing a sense of one's relationship to other people. The self-concept incongruence. Self-concepts are made up of impressions of ourselves and our evaluations of our adequacy. The key to happiness is congruence, or consistency between one's self-concept and one's experience. At first, self-esteem reflects the esteem in which others hold us. We cannot fully live up to the wishes of others and also remain true to ourselves. The expression of self does not always lead to conflict. The path to self-actualization requires getting in touch with our genuine feelings and acting on them. Humanistic psychologists believe that the essential aspect of human life is conscious experience, the sense of oneself as progressing through space and time. Humanistic theories are popular because they grant consciousness a key role and because they stress human freedom. These strengths are also weaknesses, because each individual's conscious experience is unique. Critics note that the humanistic theories do not predict the sorts of traits, abilities, and interests that people might develop. Sociocultural psychology focuses on the roles that ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, and culture play in shaping personality behavior and mental processes. Both family and environmental influences are key factors in personality development. Individualism versus collectivism. Individualists give priority to their personal identities and goals. Collectivists give priority to their goals of the group. Reliable measure of personality differences between the individuals from different cultures. When it comes, the United States and Western Europe are largely considered individualistic countries, where the self is much more important than the community. In Asia and Africa, they tend to be collectivist cultures, where the people in those communities tend to see the community as more important than the self. Sociocultural factors and the self. Cultural factors affect the self-concept and self-esteem of the individuals. Members of the groups that have been discriminated against may have lower self-image. Acculturation and self-esteem. Personalities are influenced by cultural settings. A Korean American child, for example, might be influenced by Korean culture at home and American culture at school. Acculturation is the process of adapting to a new or different culture. So those of you who may have moved here from other countries or have families that have moved here from other countries probably get a mixture of cultures, and so you have to adapt to the American way, and then you also, when you're at home, you have whatever your family's background might be, and in this example, Korean. Some immigrants become assimilated or absorbed into the culture of the area to which they move, and so this is pretty common. Others choose to maintain separate and retain their language and customs, and that's why you see in like New York and San Francisco areas like Chinatown, for instance. Others choose to maintain separation and they retain their language and customs. Research suggests that people who are bicultural have higher self-esteem. And so those people who speak multiple languages or, as our example here previously, someone who's both Korean and American culture fluent, have higher levels of self-esteem. They would probably have greater appreciation. The bar graph below shows the percentage of girls who are happy with their appearance. The yellow bars reveal the percentage of white girls, African American girls, and Hispanic girls in elementary school who claim that it is always true, that they are happy the way they are. The orange bars show the percentage of white girls, African American girls, and Hispanic girls in high school who made the same assertion. So in high school, everybody's happy, and in elementary school, everybody's happy with themselves. In high school, not so much. African American girls are the most happy. Okay, evaluation of the sociocultural approach provides valuable insights into the roles of ethnicity, gender, culture, and the socioeconomic status and personality formation. It allows us to understand how individuals think and behave and feel about themselves within a given cultural setting. It enhances our sensitivity to cultural differences, special implications for education. More attention should be paid to learning tools such as group activities, which may be tied to the social cultural practices. Okay, so that concludes our chapter 14 on personality. Thank you for listening.